since, well, yeah. Okay, so there we are. We've talked about the ground rules, and tonight we are going to speak to a really cool guest. And I'm so Greta Reefer is the producer of the show. She's Chip Coffey's assistant. Chip Coffey is a world-renowned psychic, and I know Chip. He's a friend of mine. Greta's a friend of mine, and Greta put this show together. And I'm telling you, I am so excited about it. I'm excited. So I'm going to be talking to a fantastic guest, and I think you're going to like it as well. Her name, by the way, is Lindsay Higgins. Lindsay Higgins. Let me give you an update, a bio on her, okay? Lindsay Higgins was born and raised in Shreveport, Louisiana. So we have some Shreveport folks here. Well, she was born in your area. But by the way, she still lives there. She still lives in Shreveport. So if you are in Shreveport, you might want to look her up. Lindsay Higgins. She is happily married to her husband, Timothy, for 5.5 years. They are parents to a beautiful, rambunctious 3-month-old lab pitty mixed girl named Selena Rose. So she has a little fur baby. I understand that. Lindsay works in a nonprofit and is currently the training coordinator for a residential facility for people with intellectual and cognitive disabilities. Love that. I used to teach special education, so we're gonna definitely click. I love teaching kids with learning disabilities and even behavior disorders. So I used to teach kids. You may have seen her on the Netflix show called Haunted. So you might want to check that out after the show. Season 1, Episode 5, telling her story about aliens and UFOs. She is also currently featured in the new book called Paranormal Pendulum 2 by Dan Baldwin. And again, she is a survivor of being abducted by UFOs. So we're going to talk to her, and this is going to be an exciting interview. So bear with me while I give her a call, and we're going to go from there. Okay. And for those of you just tuning in, my name is Bishop James Long, and we're going to speak to Lindsay Higgins. She is an individual who was abducted and has been abducted by UFOs, by aliens, and has appeared on Netflix show called Haunted, Season 1, Episode 5. So you might want to check out that after the show. Okay. Let's get her on here. Turn it up nice and loud.
Hello?
Well, hello. Is this Lindsay?
This is Lindsay.
Well, hello, Lindsay. This is Bishop Long. How are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you tonight?
Well, I am doing fantastic, and I really, really appreciate you being here and chatting with us. I'm excited. I watched the episode on Netflix, Haunted, and woo, that was pretty intense, Lindsay. That was really
try
intense.
living it. Yeah.
Yeah, try living. Yeah, well, I actually have a story that I'm going to talk to you about and see what you think. I'm going to share that story. So I did your bio, so everybody knows that you're in Shreveport, Louisiana, and that you still live there today. And so, just in your own experience, in your own words, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we're going to go right into your questions. And if people have questions in the chat room, they can certainly ask as well. So, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well,
I'm sorry?
I'm not comic book conventions. I'm really into old Hollywood movies. That's my favorite, Gene Kelly. But, I just got a new 3-month-old puppy last week, so we are going through dog training. I have no kids, but I feel this is the closest I've ever come to having a kid right now. So that's kind of where we're at right now, and that's kind of who I am, and I'm just a fun-loving, caring person who works at a nonprofit, probably works way more overtime than I should, but I love my residents, love where I work, and then, come home and take care of a dog and take care of a husband.
So you got your hands full, no question about that.
Absolutely. That is true. Yes.
All right. Well, Lindsay, let's jump into this because, and again, folks, if you have any questions in the chat room when you listen to the story, please feel free to jump in and ask the question, and I'll do the best that I can to check this out. So tell us about your experience and in your own words.
Okay, so my experience started when I was about 7, and I started having visions of like spaceships and things, but I really thought I was dreaming. When you're 7 years old, you're thinking, and now you got to remember. Let me preface this by saying this was the early '80s, so all the young kids listening today, there was no History Channel, there was no Travel Channel where you could watch 24/7 paranormal shows or shows about UFOs or anything like that. So for me, I'm 7 years old, and I keep having visions of these spaceships and these ships that are just outside of my window. And that was kind of like what started it, and I didn't think too much about it. But then I do remember one night I'm laying in bed, and it was very secluded at that time. If you were to drive over there now, it's, there's a Kroger, one, like right there beside us. So, but back in the 80s where I lived, it was out in the woods, so there wasn't street lights, there was none of that stuff. We didn't have a lot of traffic, and we kind of lived way, like, back off of the highway, so it wasn't like cars were coming around. You could see them off the highway or off the street. And I'm laying in bed, and my entire room just lights up. I mean, like football stadium bright lights. And I thought, okay, this is not normal. And I just, first time it happened, pull the covers over my head, thinking, okay, it's just going to go away. Because I'm thinking, this is not, I don't hear anything outside. I didn't hear a car, nothing. And even with, car lights, I would know that it would not, shine that bright like a stadium. So, pull the covers over my head, and then I wake up. And I thought, okay, well, that's just a really weird dream. It happened a couple more times. By like the third or fourth time, I'm like, God, this is not normal. So I remember going to the window, peeking out, and then there was the ship that I had been, quote unquote, dreaming about. And I'm thinking, okay, and I know I'm awake at this point. And I'm like, this is, in your 7-year-old mind, if you try to go back, like, and you don't know really what an alien ship is or what a spaceship is, try to put yourself in my situation, and you're like, I'm not 100% sure what this is. I've heard E.T. was popular, but I honestly was thinking, okay, this is just a movie. So I remember peeking out, but then next thing I know, I'm waking up in my bed. I don't remember walking to my bed, going back, none of that. And so this happened multiple times, and then all of a sudden I started waking up, and I would have like these really weird symbols on my skin. It would almost look like a tattoo, like an outline of a tattoo of like a triangle or a circle or a square or something like that, but it was always like a geometrical shape. I would see it, and then within like hours, it would just completely disappear, like it was not there at all. So that was the second thing that I was like, something's not really right here, but maybe I'm making it up, maybe I'm dreaming it. I didn't want to believe that anything was happening.
And so this is not a dream. This is not a dream. You are, and you know the difference between a dream, obviously, and actually real. So you are fully conscious at this time.
Yeah, I was fully conscious. It was like the next morning, I'm waking up and I'm finding these spots like on my leg. But it was always in a conspicuous place where nobody else could see it but me. If that makes sense, it wasn't like, right on my forehead or any. It wasn't where other people could see it. I would see it, and I would think, this is really weird. And, I thought, like, I didn't step on anything. I mean, I didn't lay on anything to make this shape. And I just kept it my, my mom. Let me go back if you've not watched the show.
And let me
At the time, my mother.
let me just jump in here for the
Yeah.
folks who are just joining. Again, we're talking to our special guest today. For those of you who are just joining, because we have a lot of people who are just joining, Lindsay Higgins is our special guest. She was also appeared on Netflix Haunted, season 1, episode 5, I believe it was. I watched it. You should watch it as well. Lindsay says that she was in fact abducted by aliens, and that she's giving her experience now. For those of you who are wanting to know, yes, the Vatican has made it very clear that you can absolutely be Christian and still, in fact, believe in alien life. As a matter of fact, the Vatican has a huge planetarium there. I mean, it's massive. So yes, they are very, very open to the idea of discussing and believing in alien life. So, Lindsay is talking a little bit about her experience about being abducted. So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. So for those that haven't seen the show, at the same time that all of this is happening, my mother is dying of breast cancer. So it was a really stressful time in our family. My dad's working full time. My mom's dying. I'm seeing this. My aunt, who was raising me at the time, she's in her late 70s. So, it was just a really stressful time, and I'm thinking, I'm not going to bring this up, because, one, I'm not 100% sure that my dad, who is a strong Italian Catholic man, is even going to listen to anything I say. And the reason why I say that is because at that time, where we were living was on Indian land. The Caddo Indians had a trade center where our property was. Matter of fact, there's a what do you call it, like a historical plaque on our land. But I would always see shadow figures, and they were always in threes, and they were always really tall. I mean, like, we lived in a trailer, a double wide trailer. So, I mean, you're talking like I could see them in the windows, and so we're talking at least 7-8 feet. Slender, but I could tell that it was a body. And it would just scare me to no end. And I would tell my dad, and he would run out there to see. Nobody was out there. And after about the third or fourth time, then he started, like, getting on to me. So I got to spank him because I was lying. I was trying to scare my sister, which was not the case, because I'm legit, like, I'm seeing something. So I realized then, I'm like, I can't bring this up to my dad because I'm not sure he's even going to believe me. And then, I was that sensitive child that I knew what was going on. I knew that my mom was dying. I didn't want to add more stress to the family. I kept my mouth shut. So when I'm about 9 or 10, somewhere around there, I end up in the emergency or in the hospital because I'm having severe abdominal pain. Like, constant, cannot walk, cannot move. I'm just in a lot of pain. And at the time, it was a big deal in the family because they were like, well, what's going on with Lindsay, So they run all these tests, and the doctor comes back and was like, there's nothing wrong with your daughter. But we 100% believe that she is making this up to get attention because she sees her mom in the hospital, and that's getting her attention. So she's made it all up. Well, that did not go over real well with my dad, because then he's like, "You've wasted my money," and and I'm like, "Dad, I'm telling you, I'm in pain."
Now, if you don't mind my asking, so the medical people are saying that you're making all this abduction stuff up. Did they? And again, I just have to ask because there was a question in the chat room, and it was a good question. Did they diagnose? Was there any diagnosis of a mental illness at that time as well, or just that you were just trying to seek attention?
No, it was just that I was trying to seek attention.
Okay.
That as I guess as a child, when a child's witnessing a parent die, that they see the attention that parent is getting.
Yeah.
From being sick, so that's where they were saying that I was just making it up.
Gotcha. Yeah, the sympathy attention. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so so the visions of the of the spacecraft kept coming, but then I don't, and then I kind of like stopped remembering, or maybe I'm putting it out of my mind at that time, because maybe I get asked a lot, like, why can't you remember fully what happened? And I truly believe that when I'm being abducted, when I'm going through, and I do believe that they are doing actual, they're doing research on me. I believe that they put that out of your mind. If you think of like Men in Black, where they have the look at the light, and I kind of believe that that's it. And I think that when you start breaking through, when there's one little thing that happens that kind of wakes you up, and then you go, you know what, that's not all made up. So I end up moving to, this is like 13 years old. I end up moving into town. And at that point, I don't remember anything. I'm like, okay, good, it stopped. If this was happening, it was only happening at that place. Everything's great right now. And so everything's fine for about 4 or 5 years, something like that. And then I go to college, and I come back, and I ended up moving back home. And my dad's like, you know what? He was recently remarried. He's like, it's just going to be better if you have your own place. So he gave me, he had a couple houses, so he let me live in one. And so I'm living in that house, and I'm up late one night studying, and I go to bed, and I know I'm tired, but not this tired. So all of a sudden I lay in bed, and all of a sudden the room illuminates again. And I look over to the window, but now the entire wall has like dissipated. I can see through the wall. I see the ship as plain as day. I can see the outside. I can see the trees. I can see the billboard behind. I can see the street light. I'm seeing through my wall. And I'm like, oh, my God. And I'm frozen. I'm frozen in terror. Well, the next thing you know, I'm being pulled up from my bed, and there's a fan above my bed. And I remember grabbing hold of the fan, and then I'm just, next thing you know, I'm being jerked into, and I mean fast, like into the ship.
And this is not a dream. You're fully, again, conscious at this time.
I'm conscious at this time.
And
right.
And how old are you again?
Mm-hmm. I'm about 19 or 20. I'm in college at this time.
Okay.
And so I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, so I wake up, but I'm back in bed. Like, the last thing I remember was being pulled toward the ship, and I thought, okay, that had to be a dream, like nothing else. But I looked down at my fingers, and I'm not the best housekeeper, especially in college. So there was some dust on the fan. I have the dust on my fingers.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, okay, that's the first real, this is really happening. So I get up in a chair or something, and I look at the ceiling fan. And there it is. There's my fingerprint. And you could see where I was gripping. And I'm like, that took a lot for me to grasp.
For those of you who are just joining, we have lots of questions, but for those of you who are just joining in, folks, we're having a fantastic conversation. I know a lot of people just have logged in. Sometimes they logged in a little late, and that's perfectly okay. Nothing wrong with that. And we're having a really, really awesome conversation with Lindsay Higgins. Lindsay Higgins, again, appeared on Netflix Haunted, Season 1, Episode 5, and she's talking about her alien abduction situations. She's been abducted several times, not just once. So she's talking about her actual experience about being abducted. And so, by the way, if you have questions and you write it down and you see me nod, that means I've seen your question, and I'm typing it in the notes. So we have a lot of folks in the chat room. So if you do ask a question and you see me nod immediately after your question, you know that I've seen it, and I'm writing it down. So we'll get your questions. I promise. This is just an amazing interview. So go ahead then.
Okay, so after that experience, I really kind of kept it tucked away, and I'm like, I cannot tell anybody that. I don't even know where to begin to tell anybody. I mean, this is still mid '90s, so we're still looking at. There's not a lot of discussion. I mean, you've been those that are older. It was still taboo to talk about this. To even
Right.
admit that you've even seen one, let alone
Yeah.
you think you've been abducted. So I'm meeting with one of my dad's friends. She was older. She was more like a great aunt to me, but she was just an awesome, awesome woman. But we had this weird connection that we connected on a totally different level. Like, I felt like I could tell her anything, and she would listen, and she would understand. So I would hang out with her house. I remember I said I was really into old movies, and I loved that because she had all these old movies. We would go over to her house and spend hours watching old movies and talking. And something was brought up about aliens or something, or paranormal. I can't even remember exactly what it was. And I was like, I've had experiences. And she's like, really? And I said, yeah. And so I feel like, okay, now's the time. I'm going to tell her. So I start to tell the story about how I'm laying in bed, and all of a sudden this bright light shows or comes through the window, and she goes, let me stop you there. And I thought, this is it. The friendship is about to go down south. She's going to be like, you're crazy. And she goes, I'm going to go ahead and finish your story. And I was like, what? And she goes, I'm going to finish your story. And I said, okay. She says, you see the light, you turn, and all of a sudden the wall dissipates, and there's a ship out there. And I'm like, what? Yes. I'm like, how did you know that? And she goes, do you feel that you were abducted? And I said, as a matter of fact, I do. And she goes, well, good, because you were. And it's not made up. You perfectly witnessed that, and other people in this area, in the Shreveport-Bossier area, are witnessing and having those same type of experiences.
So let me ask you this
And I
question.
said, shut.
Can I ask you, because, well, I can't believe the time is just flying by. A lot of people want to know, did they communicate with you? Did they talk? Did you know? Was there any form of communication?
Okay, so the form of communication that the few times that I can, or the one true time that I remember witnessing being on a gurney, being in a exam room, being examined on, it was a bright, dead bright light, and I couldn't really see. I could see a shadow, and I had this presence that it was a female that was with me, and there was no talking, but I could hear her say, "It's okay, just relax, you're fine." So it was all telepathic, and there's no words spoken. And since then, since the experiences, matter of fact, if you watched Haunted, George, who was the MUFON
Yep.
Man on the show, we've become really good friends, and we have been reading. And what has been brought out in the pendulum reading is that essentially I am a very old soul, and I have been reincarnated multiple times, but in past life, however many years ago, I don't even know how far back it goes, I somehow gave them permission to do experiments on me. Now, that does not mean that Lindsay Higgins of today offered, the experiment, but my past soul did. And so apparently they have followed me throughout the generations. So that is an aspect that George and another friend of ours, Dan Baldwin, we're looking into. Can these aliens, whatever grays, whatever you want to call them, are they following a path of, is it one person? Is it a lineage? How far back does this go?
Well, what do you think? What do you
If
think that they wanted with you? I mean,
I think
it's specifically, what did they do as far as, did they operate? Did they remove something? Did they implant something? What did they?
so.
Yeah, what did
Yes,
they? Go ahead.
I truly believe that I have given birth to a hybrid.
Really?
And the reason why I say that is because the experience that I do remember vividly, I end up, and this is late 20s, I end up back in the emergency room with severe abdominal pain, like to the point I cannot walk. My dad had to come and physically put me in a car. When I got to the emergency room, they had to come out, put me on a wheelchair to even get me. I could not walk. I was in so much pain, abdominal pain. And let me preface this by saying it's always in the same position, the same place on my body. It is my lower left-hand abdomen. And at this point, when I went into the hospital, they're like, okay, the first thing they checked me for was it an atopical pregnancy? It wasn't. Then they're like, okay, we don't know. We could tell she's in pain. And I'm laying there, and all of a sudden I start screaming to my aunt, who is there with me. I'm like, how could you let them take me? How could you let them do that to me? And she's like, what are you talking about? She's like, you have not left this room. And I said, yes, I have. I said, I was in a bright room, and I was like, they had my legs spread open. They were holding me down, and they were inserting something vaginally into me. And I said, I'm in pain. I can't deal with this. How could you let them do it? She's like, Lindsay, you've been asleep this whole time. Because they given me, or they just said, they give me something to calm me down. And I felt like, no. I was like, it clear as day. It wasn't until later that I realized that was a past memory. That was why I was in pain, because I believed that I had been taken probably the night before. And I think that they had removed a hybrid from me. I think that they are looking at, and I don't, I get asked, what do you think these are? I don't know if they're trying to find another planet, if their planet's dying and they need to see if they can procreate with humans and create another race. I don't really know what that aspect is, but I truly believe that I have given birth to a hybrid.
And what
and
you know what you're
that's what they are using me for.
what you're saying. I've heard this many times from many people who are quite credible. So people who are listening to this for the first time might think, "Oh, come on, good grief! Now you're being impregnated by an alien." Okay, but this is not new, guys. There have been cases where, unbelievable cases where, and it was well documented scientifically, what something happened to individuals who claim that they in fact did give birth to a hybrid. This is not the first time this has been reported. So what Lindsay is saying is it's not unusual when it comes to women. It seems being abducted. It really is not. And I've heard this a lot. Now there is a great question. Some people have been introduced to their hybrid child. Have you ever been introduced during your abductions that you can remember?
I have. We've done a pendulum reading, and every time we've done it, we've asked this multiple times, different times of the day, different places. Have I ever met my hybrid? And it always swings to yes.
Oh wow!
And
you have
along the way, I have.
but you obviously have no memory of that.
I do not. And I think they want it that way, because I couldn't have children, and that's another part of the story was that when I was 39, 40, a few years back, I had to have a hysterectomy at my age because, when the doctor came, she was like, "Oh, Lindsay," she was like, "You have a horrible," she's like, "You have like the trifecta." She was like, "You have like scarring tissue, you have fibroids, you have cysts, you have these tumors." She's like, "It looks horrible." And I'm thinking, okay, but I've never been diagnosed with endometriosis. I've never had the pain or the constant pain that every other woman that I've met that has endometriosis complains about. Mine is a very sporadic pain that always happens after I wake up in the middle, or it happens in the middle of the night, and it's always a night where how tired I am. I do not want to go to sleep. There's something telling me, don't fall asleep, don't fall asleep. I'm anxious. My anxiety is up. I have to walk around the house, and I have to go outside, walk around. And it's almost inevitably after that is the next day I'm having this severe abdominal pain.
So,
And then
can I ask you this question?
away.
There's so many questions. There's so many questions that we have. There's so many, and they're really really good questions. We have a list of questions also that we always try to compile before the show. But there are so many questions in the chat room because people are really truly genuinely interested in this story. Now, what about your personal beliefs? As far as your faith and belief in God, I would imagine that being abducted in your case and continuing to be abducted, well, two questions. The first part is, are you still being abducted? And the second question is, what is your faith? And has being abducted by aliens shaken your faith, strengthened your faith? So if you could answer those two questions.
Okay, so the first one is I absolutely am still being abducted.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, I've now moved to where I wake up and there are these weird little dots, and they're scabs, but they're tiny, tiny, and they are arranged in a way. I woke up back in January where it formed a complete triangle on my wrist, and I showed my husband, and my husband, he's one of these that he's fascinated by this, but he's not, until it happens to him, he's one of these that's like, I believe you believe it happened. One of the, and I'm married to this guy, so, when somebody tells me they don't believe me, I'm like, well, okay, my husband, he believes me to a point. But I woke up, and I see that, and I was like, Tim, come check this out. And he goes, ooh. He goes, that's a perfect triangle. I mean, it was symmetric. I mean, it was even from space to space. And he's like, it looks like something has been hooked up to you, like a medical device. I said, yeah, it does. And I had been having abdominal pain that day, the night before. I didn't want to go to sleep. I was anxious. I couldn't, function. And then a couple weeks ago, it happened again. But this one was almost like a straight line. It was 4 dots. From the first dot to the second dot was like 4 millimeters. From the second dot to the third dot was 1 millimeter. And from the third dot to the fourth dot was exactly 4 millimeters. So it was symmetrical. So when I noticed that, my husband comes home from work. I left work before he had gotten up. And so when he came home, I have a ruler sitting by his table, and he goes, what's this? I was like, we're about to check something. I said, I need you to look at this. And I said, we're going to check it. And he was like, Lindsay, he's like, this is insane. He was like, you didn't scrape yourself. He was like, not to be this precise. I said, exactly. So yes, to answer, I'm still being abducted. And I'm a devout Catholic.
Okay.
And so it has not shaken my faith. I think that it has actually made me stronger in my faith. And I think that if you look at the religious aspect I don't know if anybody watches Ancient Aliens, but I'm going to guess that probably some of your
Yeah.
listeners do. Georgia Supla said, and I think he nailed it. There's the big G God, and there's the little G God. And the little G gods would be those spacemen, what did the Indians call them? They were the sky men. I believe that was the little gods. They didn't know how else to say it, but they came, they gave them knowledge. If you read Enoch and, Elijah, they were taken on a chariot. What was a chariot back then? Into the sky. They didn't have words for ship or plane or, they don't know any of this. So the closest they could come to was a chariot. So I think there is proof there. And I think that the big G, the God that I worship, that created the universe, created all of us. And that, we have free will. So, these creatures, their free will is, if it's to take me, you see murders all the time. Their free will was to take another life. I'm not saying it's fair, it's not right, but I believe that that's where we're at. And if I lost my faith in God, the big G, I think I would really be lost, because I find such strength in going to Mass and knowing that He's there and that He's forgiven my sins, and that I don't think He's going to I don't think I'm going to die under this, is what I'm saying. I don't think they're going to kill me. I don't think, but I do think that I'm going to be, experimented on till probably the day I die. And, maybe that's fine. Maybe in some small way, eventually I will help somebody else. Maybe I'm helping the universe with my hybrid. I don't know. But I like to believe that. I would like to believe that everything I've gone through is not for nothing.
Sure. Now, and of course, a lot of people talk about Genesis, about Nephilims, and actually, the proper Greek translation for Nephilim actually means fierce warriors. So there was a mistranslation that Nephilim were the offspring of angels and saints, but it also says in Scripture that angels will never ever take wives. And so, therefore, and I'm talking about the people in the chat room are asking about this. So, for clarification, for purposes, it mentions in Scripture the angels will never marry, they will never take wives, they will never impregnate women, because it makes it very clear that they will never take wives, meaning that they will never consecrate their marriage. So, the Genesis 2, which you're talking about, someone put it in the chat room, the gap theory. That in fact the Nephilims, that angels and women had intercourse, but actually that contradicts Scripture. So the fierce warriors Nephilims does not mean giants; it means fierce warriors in the proper Greek, in the Vulgate. So just to give you guys a little background on that information, do you believe, Lindsay, from your perspective? Do you believe that these aliens that abducted you, would you define them as demons? Or would you truly define them as just creatures, species that has been created by the one true God and that just happens to live in another solar system or Milky Way galaxy? What would you say? How would you answer that?
I don't believe they're demons, and I've heard that theory more than one time. No, I truly believe that they are creatures. Whether you want to say another dimension, and it could be a dimension that we're unaware of, or it could be another solar system, it could be another planet. That's what I believe. And now I'm also under the theory too that if you look into aliens, you have all different kinds of species of aliens. You have the reptilians, you have the draconians.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm sorry. Have you been abducted by both?
Yeah.
Have you been abducted by both, or would you say just one particular one? And can you explain the difference between the reptilians, the greys? Because there might be a lot of people who may not know that. So,
Sure.
Have you been abducted by all of them, or just one particular species?
Great question. Okay, so I have been abducted by the Greys. Now, the Greys are your typical. When you think of an alien, you think of like Area 51, and they have the gray head with the two big eyes.
Yep.
That's considered the Greys. I truly am beginning to believe that the Greys are more like robot types, that they are the ones that do the dirty work for the higher up. I believe that they're more robotic, that they're not so much flesh and blood. So I think that they have any feelings. It seems like that being abducted, and from everything that I have read, and I've done a lot of research on it, I've met people, it's like they're on one mission. It's like I've got to do what's being asked of me. So that's why I believe that they're more like the worker bees, doing the dirty work. But I believe that the higher-ups, I believe that I'm being studied by the Draconians. When I've done the pendulum readings, we specifically asked who was it the Greys that did the on the tables? Were they the ones doing this? Yes. But was it for their purpose or no? Okay, what was it for a purpose of another alien race? Yes. And maybe it's not the Draconians, it's the Nordics.
Okay,
They're the ones that look like, the
Yeah.
Nordics are the ones that look like they're from Sweden, the blonde hair, the blue eyes. They look almost human.
Okay, so you're mentioning Draconians. You're mentioning several. Remember, people here that are listening to you, they have no idea what many of them have no idea what you're referring to. So can you explain who are the Draconians and the Epherians? Could you explain those two species?
Yeah. So the Draconian or the reptilians, I think you hear a lot about them.
Yes.
The monarch, they're reptilians. People believe that they look lizard-like.
Yep.
And people believe that they are like they're the top of the food chain, which is why people believe like the monarch and stuff here, like Prince, Queen Elizabeth, that she's one. So they're kind of believe that they've infiltrated the human body to kind of run the show, so to speak. The Draconians are another alien race form that they kind of can look human-like, but there's still something weird about them. They may take the form of a human, but you can tell something's not right with them. Whereas the Nordic, if you were to look at them, you would think like that's a human, like a really good-looking human. They're the ones that smooth skin, flawless. The hair is blonde. It's straight. It's blue eyes. That's them. So you have different types. So yes, I believe that the Greys they're the only ones that are doing the abducting, but they are doing it under the supervision of another race.
Fair enough. So let me ask you this. Being that you're a devout Catholic, if you were to stand before Christ today and put your hand on the Bible and swear in front of Christ, and if you were not telling the truth, you would lose your eternity, would you swear without question that what you have experienced was real and truthful and not a dream?
Absolutely.
Folks, you know what? Let me tell you something. When someone is willing to do that and say, yes, if I'm lying, may I lose my eternity, that right there, because a lot of people are frightened. When you talk about alien abductions and UFOs, it is a frightening thing to know that there are really credible people who have told their stories, and yet and yet they tell them, and it's frightening to know that it exists. I believe in aliens? Yes, I do. And I do believe in alien abductions. I've met people that are very credible, that have nothing to gain for lying. As a matter of fact, people you may never ever heard, nothing to gain, and they have everything to lose because they're made fun of or ostracized or whatever that might be. How is your health? Several questions that people have asked in the chat room.
Sure.
How is your health now? And does your dad believe you now, or is he still believing that this is all made up?
Okay. My health is I'm relatively healthy. The only time that I have real problems are after an abduction, where I have severe abdominal pain, and that usually lasts. It can last anywhere from a day to a week sometimes. Now that I've come to more terms of what's going on, unless it gets absolutely painful, and I have been to the emergency room several times for the pain. Something's going on, but we legit do not know what's going on. So the health is good otherwise. And the other question was my dad. So when I did the TV show, he was like, "Why are you going on the show?" And I was like, I said, "Well, would you like to wait till the show comes out?" He was like, "Absolutely not." He goes, "I need to know what to prepare for." And so we're sitting, it's just me and him. We're standing in the driveway of this house, and I said, "I've been abducted." And he goes, "You what?" I said, "I've been abducted." And he's like, "What?" And I was like, "Say it." I was like, "Maybe if you say it." And he was like, "Abducted." And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "How long has this been going on?" And I was like, "Since I was a child." And honestly, at that point, he got kind of mad. He was like, "Why didn't you tell me?
Oh.
Why have you gone through this?" And I was like, I said, "Well, let me ask you this." I said, "Do you remember the gray men when, I would tell you that I would see the gray shadow?" He's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Did you believe me then?" He's like, "No." I said, "Okay, that's shadow men." I said, "You think you are going to believe me that I've been abducted?" And he was like, "Okay, I see your point." But then when I was like, after the shock kind of wore off, I was like, "But let me ask you something." I said, "How long have I been having abdominal pain?" He's like, "Almost your entire life." I said, "Okay, where is the abdominal pain always?" He's like, "It's always on your left side." I said, "Okay." I said, "Now, how many times have I been in the hospital or gone to the emergency room, and they have run test after test, and they come back and they go, 'We legit cannot tell you what it is'?" He's like, "A lot." I said, "I think I'm being, experimented on." I said, "I think that's what the problem is." And, he stepped back and he was like, he goes, "You know what?" He goes, this is like making sense to me now. So he believes me. And I think that was a good thing for our relationship, that it brought us closer together. I can be honest with him. He even jokes about it sometimes. He's like, "Yes, the aliens have visited you," something. But I really do believe that he believes me, and he knows that I'm not the type. And anybody that knows me, matter of fact, when the TV show came out, I never told anybody I was going to be on the show. If they watched the show, that was fine, but I wasn't just going to go to the world and announce it. Sure. I felt that I did my part by doing the show, but I didn't want people to think that I was doing this fame, and there was definitely no fortune, but so I was like, if you watched it, that's fine.
Have you had hypnosis?
I had so many people that, "Oh no, I've not done hypnosis." I've thought about it.
Okay.
But yeah, so many people contacted me and they said, "This makes sense, Lindsay. We know you. We know you're not a liar. We know you don't do anything to get, you want the agenda. We 100% believe you." Now, as for the hypnosis, I've thought about it, but I realized once you go down that route, it's hard to put the genie back in the bottle, and I don't know if I 100% want to know what's been done to me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about the Men in Black? A lot of people, who talk about being abducted will report that they always are being harassed by the men in black.
Hmm.
So have you found that to be true for you?
I have had two experiences where I 100%, you cannot convince me this is another, if I stand before God, I will say it was a men in black.
Oh,
Both of them have happened at my workplace. I have a direct line, and then you have the main office line where they send you to my extension. With a direct line, I do not give out to anybody. I'm sitting at my desk, and somebody calls me from the direct line. I pick it up, and usually it's usually internal, but it wasn't this particular time. When I mean internal, I just mean somebody within the agency has that number. It's not put out to the public. I answer the phone, and it's this man. He's like, I need to speak to Timothy now. And I said, excuse me? And he goes, I need to speak to Timothy. Well, that's my husband. I said, I'm sorry. I said, this is his wife. Can I help you with anything? He goes, no. Put him on the phone now. I said, what is this in regards to? He goes, you don't need to know. And I said, well, I'm really sorry. I'm so taken aback because nobody ever calls me from my workplace. I'm really shook up at this point because this guy is really rude. He's very direct. He's asking about my husband. And I'm like, can I send him a message? He's like, nope, I will call him on the other number, and hangs up on me.
wow.
And I call my husband. I was like, hey, have you given this number to anybody? And my husband goes, I don't even know what number you're talking about, which I figured was actually really true because he would call me on the main line. And I said, well, no, I don't guess I really have given you that number. He goes, no. He goes, and if I did, it would be your cell phone. It wouldn't be a work number. Well, I drive home that day, and there is a dark car down the street, just parked, which is not, I'm where I live, that does not happen. And I can see somebody in it, and then they see that I see them, and then they take off. And I'm like, okay. So, because even my husband was like, what do you think this is? He goes, why would they call you? I said, and the first thing I really am thinking, I was like, I think that they're after me, because this was right after I recorded the show. The show wasn't even out yet. Then about a year and a half, 2 years later, my husband to my work to bring me something. He sits down, the phone rings again. I'm not even paying attention. I'm like, hey, this is Lindsay. And he goes, put Tim on the phone now. And I turned pale. And my husband's sitting across from me, and he's like, who's on the phone? And I'm like shaking. And he's like, what's going on? I'm like, it's for you. He's like, what? And I was like, it's for you. And he picks up the phone. He's like, hello. And they just hang up. Now, nobody knew my husband was coming up there. This was not, but it was so matter of fact, they knew he was there. And I'm like, and even he got really nervous at that point. He's like, okay. He's like, I 100% believe this is the Men in Black, that they are giving us a message.
Wow.
Even though it wasn't directed at me, what it was directed at was, hey, we know that your husband means everything to you. We know where he is at all times. You might need to keep your mouth shut, or, I think it was a warning, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's and I have heard many times that they will give very, very stern warning. And for those of you who don't know, Men in Black, they've been around for a long, long time. That they show up, and
A long time.
and people who talk about being abducted, they'll show up in their homes, they'll show up in their businesses. They'll frighten them. So there have been many, many things. Are you writing? Gosh, we got to close this out. Are you writing a book, or have you written a book, or where can people find you?
Okay, so I am on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I have not written a book, but there are a couple of books. One is called The Paranormal Pendulum that discusses, and it's part 2, and there's going to be a part 3 that's going to be written very soon that kind of details the paranormal aspect of me. I'll just put it to you that way. So, and I haven't really thought about writing a book, but maybe I should. So.
Well, Lindsay, I want to thank you so much for being here and chatting with
Yeah.
us. It has been
Yeah.
fantastic. I really, really appreciate
Thank you.
you doing that. So thank you very, very much, Lindsay, for being on.
Well, thank you for having me and let me share my story. And hopefully, if anybody's having experiences like this, you're not alone. If you need to reach out, talk to somebody, send me a message.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Lindsay, and have a beautiful, beautiful night. Okay. Well, yeah, it was interesting because we were losing connection several times, and that's a brand new phone. So that's a very, very odd how that was losing connection like that. That's kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Several of you were asking about, and I'll talk briefly about the scripture. Now, does scripture say aliens exist and they're from outer space? No, but it does say, for those of you who are wanting to know this, Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 4. Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 4. It says here, as I looked, behold, a stormy wind came about the north, and a great cloud with brightness around it, a fire flashing forth continually, and in the midst of the fire, as it were gleaming metal. Isaiah, they come from a distant land, from the end of heavens, the Lord and the weapons of his indignation to destroy the whole land. Isaiah, I made the earth and created man on it. It was my hands that stretched out to the heavens. I commanded all their host. So, meaning more than one than the human species. Who are these that Isaiah, again, chapter 60, verse 8. Who are these that fly like a cloud and like doves to their windows? It goes on and on and on. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, for we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers, over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in heavenly places. There are so many that mentions, I can go on and on and on and on and on and on, that mentions the possibility when you read this that, yeah, there's clearly something else going on. Do I believe in alien life? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And now the Vatican have already responded to, is it possible that you can be Christian and still believe in alien life? Well, yes. And there are many bishops and even cardinals in the Vatican that absolutely have been on record when they've asked, do you believe in alien life? And they have said yes. So again, you're not just taking my word for it, or even Lindsay's word. If the Vatican is your source of authority, then there have been bishops and there have been cardinals on record who have verified that they do believe that there is alien life. So, we can go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth all day long, but I do certainly believe that there is something there. Because there are just far too many. There's far too many people who are credible who are talking about being abducted, and the people who don't even know each other, and their stories are almost identical. So when you listen to this and you break it down, you have to cut. You can't just dismiss it, because when their stories are very similar and they don't know each other, or they've never been on television, they've never done any of. I mean, you've got to pay attention to that. So. Now there is a theory that aliens are demons. So there's a lot of people who actually believe that aliens are fallen angels. I don't believe that at all. I think alien life does exist. To think that we actually are the only life in the universe is just absurd. It's absurd. There are billions with a B, billions of galaxies just like ours, much older, billions with a B now. And keep in mind also, I don't think you quite maybe even understand how big the universe is. Do you know that in order for you to get to Jupiter, now just think about it, this is in our own solar system. In order for you to get to Jupiter, if you got on a rocket and if you flew 42,000 miles per hour, 42,000. miles per hour. Now just think about that. It would take you 10 years to get to Jupiter from Earth. So if you think it would take 42,000 miles per hour just to get to Mars, it would take you 3 years. So if you think about that and think about just the distance, and then we're this tiny little speck of dust when it comes to our Milky Way. We're so very small. Our sun is relatively young. It's not an older star. So our sun is relatively young. We're not an old solar system. And so to think that we're the only ones, no, I don't believe that. I do believe that there are others. And that's frightening, because if they are here, which I do believe they are, that means they are far more advanced, technology speaking, than we are, far more advanced. And that is frightening, because they then become the superior species over human beings. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of people who absolutely believe that they have been abducted, and I believe their stories are many people are very credible. I have met attorneys, I have met pastors, I have met military personnel. I mean, I met doctors, and these people have said that they were abducted. And these are individuals that have nothing to gain I know several pastors who have told me, yeah, they absolutely were abducted. And they have nothing to gain, actually everything to lose. Because if they go public and they start talking about their experience, they'll be ridiculed. And they'll never be taken seriously. So I do believe there's something there. Something is there. Let's see. I don't know if there's any. I don't know if there's other life in our solar system. I don't know if I believe that, but again, life, it could be a lot of things. I mean, you're talking about a different species that maybe are not as advanced. I simply don't know. I don't know. But it was a very interesting interview. Lindsay Higgins. And again, for those of you who are listening to the interview, she was on the Netflix show called Haunted, season 1, episode 5, Alien Abduction, I think it's called. So check it out, and you can actually see her. She can tell her whole story, and there you go. But it is pretty fascinating. It is a really, I think, anytime you talk about these type of topics, it's scary. You're talking about being abducted and having things done to you that you don't want, and you can't run away. And I spoke to Travis Walton several times. He was from the movie called The Fire in the Sky. We're trying to get him on. We're trying to get him on as a special guest. So we're going to keep pushing for that, and hopefully Travis will be willing to jump on and chat with us. But that's an amazing, absolutely amazing story. What was a good question? Joey Snyder, Shannon said that was a good question. It's hard to read because I have the lights. Do I think they have God's word? Oh, that's a good question. And actually, it talks about scripture that Christ's crucifixion was universal. So in other words, Christ would not be re-crucified. And I learned this in the seminary, actually. We talked about the possibility of alien life. And if that was the case, would Christ be re-crucified then on another planet? And Bishop Bob Barron, who actually, he's a bishop in the Roman Catholic Church. I studied with Bishop Bob Barron. I took several of his classes, obviously the seminary, and he said no. It's a universal event, and there would not be any crucifixion. And we don't know how they would know, or we just simply don't know. But as far as being re-crucified, he said from a theological perspective that would not happen, because that was universal. That was a cosmic event. Cosmic meaning universal, affecting every life species that exists in the universe. Okay, so anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed. Unfortunately, we had some bad apples in here who just trying to get attention. That was kind of, when I'm doing an interview, I try to focus on the interview. Because if I'm focusing on the chat room and then blocking people and then doing this and this, I can't focus on the conversation. I just can't, because I'm trying to listen to the conversation and focus on what they're saying, and at the same time looking in the chat. And I don't like doing that, because then I might miss something that the guest says to me. And that's, you always want to make sure you listen very carefully to everything that they say, so that you can question them on what they say, and that makes the interview even more interesting and more in depth. And so I don't really like. That's why we have great